Socrates was kind of like an internet troll before internet trolls, but he wasn't just a troll because he was actually searching for something bigger, something greater, his concept of justice. He eventually gets sentenced to death, yada, yada, yada. So, what is it really saying? In the beginning, there was the Logos, and the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God, and the Logos was made flesh and dwelt among us. Pow! Squabba! Sorry, I got a little excited, but I get fired up from it, man. Hello, everybody. We're going to talk about probably the most important thing in the history of the world that most people have never heard about before. Are you ready? It's called the Logos. If you've heard of the Logos before, I need you to run to the comment section and type it up right now. If you haven't heard of the Logos before, get ready because I'm about to blow your mind. Why do I know this? Because this is how my mind was blown when I first heard about this. So first off, why are we talking about the Logos? Why is it so important? The Logos is important because it is probably one of the most sophisticated and massive metaphysical terms in the history of the world. I know that sounds a little hyperbolic, but it's not. It really is something. So get comfortable, get ready, because we're about to have a lesson in philosophy. And as always, the channel is called Dialogos because I don't believe in debates. I believe in dialogue, and I am trying to start a conversation. So if you have any input, let me know in the comments. Make sure to smash the like button. Make sure to subscribe because I'm trying to grow this channel. But really, what I'm really hoping for is I'm trying to find all the smart people out there. I'm trying to build a community of like-minded folks who are also in pursuit of the truth, which I believe ties into the Logos. So if you're ready, let's get ready, set, go. So why are we talking about the Logos? Well, we're talking about it because in the beginning of the Gospel of St. John, it says, in the beginning there was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. Well, that's the English translation, but that English word is actually the Greek word logos because the Gospel of St. John was actually written in Greek. So if we want to understand what the gospel is saying, we have to understand the Greek word that was used to describe Jesus Christ. And the word that John used that was inspired by the Holy Spirit was the logos. So what is the logos? Well, in order to understand the logos, we have to go all the way back to the beginning of philosophy, which in the Western world started in Asia Minor with Thales of Miletus. See, philosophy at this point was trying to find out what was the underlying universal principle of reality. And essentially at this time, these guys were materialists, which means that they believed that material reality was the underlying structure of ultimate reality. So it starts with Thales of Miletus, and he said, everything is water. I'm going to double check that. Thales of Miletus saying everything was water. Eureka! It's true. Okay. Thank you, Google. Fuck you, Google. Just in general, that's what Google deserves. So Thales of Miletus believed that everything was water, and that makes sense. Every living being needs water to survive. So that was his first attempt at trying to figure out what this universal substance was. Next, it went to somebody who believed that everything was air. And that makes sense also because we all need air to breathe and to live. But things get super interesting with Heraclitus. But Heraclitus changed the game. Why? Because he said that the underlying universal principle was fire. Because Heraclitus made a simple observation. He said, everything is changing, yet everything is remaining exactly the same. And this is perfectly manifest in fire because the fire is never the exact same shape. It's never the exact same thing, yet it's always the exact same thing because it's always fire. And he summarized this as everything being in eternal flux or change and eternal logos or order. His most famous saying is you can never step in the same rivers twice. So what did he mean by that? On one hand, the river is never exactly the same. It's always made up of different grains of sand, different fish are in it, different actual physical molecules of water. The exact banks and boundaries of the river are constantly changing. However, on the other hand, the river is always the same because the river always has banks, water, etc., etc. So Heraclitus was really the first to start bringing in the term logos. And the way that he used it, again, was this eternal order that exists out there. Now, philosophy at this point kind of hit a dead end, primarily because they were trying to understand physical reality, but ultimately their ability to observe how big is big, how small is small, the tools that they use to observe reality or the technology kind of hit a stopping point. And this philosophical dead end, if you will, can be summed up with Democritus, who said, all there is atoms in the void. So philosophy kind of reached a standstill. So what ended up happening was what are they called? What are their names? Sophists. So what ended up happening was the sophists ended up being the heirs to philosophy, but they weren't exactly philosophers. Not trying to bash any sophist out there. I know they get a bad rap, but for the purpose of how I'm trying to explain this philosophical narrative, that's kind of how we're looking at the sophist right now. They use the tools of philosophical inquiry and they kind of applied it to debate. So you can think of the sophists generally as like lawyers, people who are trained in arguments so that they can win debates. So all the aristocrats at this time, they all wanted their kids to learn rhetoric because they believed that that translated into money. Again, this is a simplification, so people are going to get upset. There's the door. Okay. You can just get out. Just kidding. Please stay. I need to grow this channel. But something big happened, and it was Socrates. And if you want to understand Socrates, Socrates was kind of like an internet troll before internet trolls, but he wasn't just a troll because he was actually searching for something bigger, something greater, his concept of justice. But basically what he did was he walked up to anybody who claimed to know something and he basically kind of challenged them to a debate, but it really wasn't that. It was a dialogue. What was it? Dialogos? And so Socrates is really credited with rescuing philosophy from the sophist. And because Socrates trolled so many people, he eventually gets sentenced to death, yada, yada, yada. And just to show you how awesome Socrates is, his last words were, hey, by the way, can you make sure Tommy gets 2 chickens that I own? While he was staring death in the face. I don't know. Socrates is the man. Shout out to all the ENTPs out there. I'm an ENTP, so Socrates is kind of like the ideal archetype in our realm. But true to ENTP status, Socrates never wrote any of what he said down. Instead, Socrates had a protege. In comes Plato. And really everything that we know about Socrates comes from the writings of Plato because Plato wrote everything in the form of dialogues. I know a lot of people have read Plato's Republic, and the way that it's structured really seems more like a play than it does some type of philosophical treatise. And in this philosophical play, if you will, Socrates was often the main character that Plato used to describe his philosophical ideas. So Plato wrote Plato's Republic. He achieved immortality through his works. Plato had his own protege, Aristotle. And Aristotle blew everybody's nips off with his big brains. Shout out to It's Always Sunny. Probably won't put that in there. I might, though. I might. So in comes Aristotle, and he kind of perfected Greek philosophy. He articulated the virtue system and Nicomachean ethics. He was kind of like the first scientist, if you will. The man was a prolific writer, and we're still talking about Aristotle to this day. So once again, he also achieved immortality. But there you have it. Boom, boom, boom. From Socrates, Plato to Aristotle, we had the biggest leap in philosophical philosophizing. We had the biggest leap in philosophical understanding in the history of the world. And what was the crown jewel of the Greek philosophical system? It was none other than the Logos, which they understood to be the immaterial order of the universe. So I know we talked a lot about the Greeks, but where does Christianity come in? Well, only a couple hundred years later, after the death of Aristotle, you had a little baby born in a manger who just so happened to be Jesus Christ. And from the Christian tradition, this changes everything. All of human history will change forever because of this one huge historic event, the birth of Jesus Christ. And Jesus lived and he died and he was resurrected, and the disciples became apostles, and the Holy Spirit descended upon them, inspired these people to write the Gospels. And who did God choose? None other than John. And what language did John use to write the Gospel? He wrote it in Greek, one of the 3 sacred languages in Christianity. Why are they sacred? Because when Christ was crucified, there was a sign written above him, and it said, "Here lies the King of the Jews." And the Romans decided to write it in 3 languages so that everybody could understand: Greek, Latin, and Hebrew. And those three languages have been canonized as the three holy languages within Christianity. So this huge event happened. Jesus Christ was born. So how is John going to describe this event? Well, John said, in the beginning there was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. But that word that he chose to use was the Logos. So what is it really saying? In the beginning, there was the Logos, and the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God, and the Logos was made flesh and dwelt among us. Pa! Squabba! Sorry, I got a little excited, but I get fired up from it, man. And it is through the Gospel of John that philosophers and theologians and everybody would start to begin their quest to truly try to understand who Jesus is and what is the Logos. And many philosophical traditions would talk about this. You have the Stoics with Marcus Aurelius, who famously talks about the Logos. You got the Neoplatonists. You have Aristotle. You have St. Augustine. You got Thomas Aquinas, each kind of talking about the Logos. But within the Christian worldview, the Logos ends up being the immaterial superstructure of ultimate reality, the divine mind of God, if you will. And that's why I think it's actually a philosophical misstep to say that there's some type of beef or debate between faith and reason. Because faith and reason are both not ends in and of themselves, but what are they? They're means to the same end, which is what? The truth, which is who? Jesus Christ. Because not only is Jesus Christ the order of the universe, he is the truth. Truth is the correspondence between the mind and the thing. And I'm saying the ultimate thing is Jesus, the Logos. And because Jesus is quite literally the order of the universe, what this does is it grants philosophers green light to go off and study the universe. Because whatever's true in physics and whatever's true in biology and whatever's true in sociology and whatever's true in psychology and whatever's true in mathematics, et cetera, is always going to be true within Christ, because in some way you're actually starting to understand Jesus, because you're understanding the general structure of reality. But as we know, about 500 years ago, faith and reason kind of had a divorce. Faith said, see you later. Reason said, see you later. And in this weird quagmire, we find ourselves at the brink of collapse of the American empire and the Western world in general. And we can't seem to figure out why this is all happening. And I posit that if we just understand who Jesus was, if we just understand the Logos, this could be the single term that could unite faith and reason once again, because ultimately both faith and reason long for what? They long for the truth. And who is the truth? It's none other than Jesus Christ. So there you have it. Now you have a better understanding of this term Logos. And now you can be even more annoying at the Thanksgiving dinner table. I tell you, Susie, all he does is talk about the Logos. You know what, Susie? Maybe you should too. If you found this interesting, if you have any thoughts, make sure you leave them in the comments section. Let's start our own dialogos today.